Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine, and today I have a chalk drawing to share with you for our Islamic Waldorf inspired main lesson block on the letters. Today we are working on the letter H and the word horse and hijra. So I just cleaned off my chalkboard with a paper towel. These chalkboards are by Waldorf Supplies. They are 22 inches by 32 inches, and I am using my Sargent Art chalk pastels. Alright, so this chalk drawing is going to end up taking me about 30 minutes, and I do it over the course of 2 days just because I didn't have enough time on the day that I started this chalk drawing. And usually these drawings on this size chalkboard take about 15 to 30 minutes. Now I'm using this zebra to kind of help me out because I'm trying to draw a horse and I am terrible at drawing living things, and so that zebra was the closest thing I had to a horse, and it actually helped quite a bit. Alright, so we're going to start doing this in quite the Waldorf way by kind of circling out from the center and kind of building the horse rather than outlining it, and I found that it really helped a lot. The tail is up in the air so that we can kind of get the letter H out of this horse, out of the image, and this is also part of the Waldorf way to introduce the letters, where the letter is going to be kind of embedded in the image of that word. So it's the letter H and it is in the shape of a horse. So this story is about hijra, which also becomes with the letter H, and it is at a time when the Muslims were migrating from Mecca to Yathrib, or which was later known as Medina. So I've started out by outlining some of the other things in the background. That is the Kaaba on the right side. I have made the Kaaba look what I imagine it to look like in the past. It is not looking the way it looks like today, with the black cloth with the Quranic ayat embroidered around the top. And I'm also trying to make kind of what I think would look like the adobe houses and some of the tents, like what the Bedouins may have used. This is not in any way historically accurate. This is more for inspiration and just to spark the imagination for these stories and for this main lesson. Alright, so I'm adding some gray to the Kaaba. I'm going to kind of make it look like those are blocks, and then there's going to be a doorway. And I am using my black in order to outline everything. And I am sorry that this is kind of off screen right now. I'm going to move it a little bit later. So I'm going to just kind of give each of those blocks a little bit of definition. And I tend to do this where I may only have one or two major things in the chalk drawing, but then I try to give detail to that so it's not totally sparse. But this chalk drawing is going to be presented to my daughter, who is 7, at the start of the lesson, which ideally should be a day before you actually present the story part of the lesson, and then on the second or third day you can do the lesson itself. So it's a nice 3-day rhythm, which we've managed finally to do, and so it worked out really well. However, we don't add anything else in those 3 days. So these lessons are just taking 2 to 3 days without there being any overlap with the other lessons. And traditionally, you may have this drawing up, but you may still be working on the previous lesson. So what we've done is do the drawing, we'll present the story. Usually it is orally presented, and what I have found is that it's working really well to present it in the evening before we do the lesson the following day. And then when we finally do the lesson, we're doing the crayon drawing as well as the other language arts content to the lesson. So once I'm done giving a general outline to my chalk drawing, then I can go back in with the chalk and kind of layer in some colors. And I'm choosing all of these really warm kind of desert tones to do this drawing, and I'm even going to use yellow for this sky. And then I use black to outline everything, which really helps define all the different details in this image. Looking at it from my perspective, it kind of looks like a mess. But then when I pull back and I kind of set it up, you really see kind of the depth in the image that isn't as present when you're first doing it. So a tip if you are working on chalk drawings for the first time is go ahead and do the best you can do, but then don't fret about it, because once you pull back, you'll probably be really impressed with how it turns out. And something else is adding shading here and there really helps give your chalk drawing some depth. Okay, so I only have the single horse in the front, and probably as much detail as what we're going to do in our crayon drawing, but in general you can add more detail to the chalk drawing because this is going to be the inspiration for the lesson, but not necessarily what the children are actually going to draw. So if I had a lot of horses and camels and other animals that the Muslims would probably be using for hijrah, for migration, that might be too complicated for the story, and I really did want the main horse to be prominent so that you could really try to imagine how that letter H kind of is drawn out of the horse. So you can see that it's still just a white horse, and I'm now going back to layer in some details in the background, and this is basically the process that I go through. I'll get something kind of outlined, then I'll move to some other part in the drawing, then I'll come back in and give some detail, and it's just seemed to work well for me. But you may have a different way to do your chalk drawings or your crayon drawings, and this is just something that's worked pretty well for me when it comes to chalk drawings, is that it's really easy to erase and go over it again. But because my daughter and I are going to be working on our crayon drawings next, it's also important to kind of get the foreground done first, and then you can kind of layer in the background. But if you did all the background, then you want to do the horse on top, it's not going to look as good. So being able to kind of prep this in the chalk drawing form before actually getting to the crayon lesson, it actually works out a lot better. And it kind of gives me an idea of how the crayon drawing is going to go. So now I've added just some details to the horse, and I'm still looking at that little wooden zebra for inspiration, just kind of trying to get those details just to kind of make it look like a horse. And I think that it looks pretty much like a horse, and I know the tail is up in the air, but again, that's just for to really see the image of the H, which was really hard to tell in this story, in this image, versus some of the other chalk drawings that we did in the past. Alright, so it's nearly done, just adding a bit of shading here and there. I also added a border to this drawing, and I started doing that a few chalk drawings ago, and I really liked the look. This is definitely something that you see in a lot of Waldorf chalk drawings, so I will continue to do that. This is what it looks like in the end. You really get a good perspective of those houses in the background and that horse in the foreground. So if you're interested in seeing more of the lessons in this Islamic-inspired Waldorf main lesson block on the letters, you can tap on the screen right now. And if you're interested in learning more about this curriculum that I have developed, you can find more information on my website at pepperandpine.com. And if you want to see how our homeschool is progressing on a daily basis, you can find me on Instagram at pepperandpine.